let's dive into the life of Joe Rogan. But first things first, you have to remember that most millionaires have multiple sources of income, and Joe is definitely not outside the norm. And as always, don't forget to like this video if you like content like this. But let's go back to December 24th, 2009, when Joe Rogan uploaded his first ever video on the Joe Rogan Experience. It was just him and some buddies live streaming on their crappy webcam, and less than 100 people were watching. 11 years later, he signed a multi-year exclusive deal with Spotify worth around $100 million, and he just signed another one, also marking him as one of the most listened to people in the world. And now Joe Rogan's net worth is estimated to be over $200 million. So how did this guy go from shooting the shit on a podcast to one of the most well-known and respected media personalities in the world? What are his secrets? Well, that's what today's video is all about. Let's jump into Joe Rogan's income streams. And his revenue source number one is UFC commentating. Many of you guys watching this probably know of Joe Rogan's experience in the UFC, but let's cover his most profound way of making money, which he struck a bit of gold with, and that is, again, UFC commentating. As a kid, Joe was small and got picked on and bullied at school just like me. So when he was 14 or 15 years old, he actually decided to start training at a Taekwondo school and became obsessed with the sport. Now, he did get his black belt 2 years later, although I also trained Taekwondo around the same age, and let's just say I didn't get that far, but he happened to also win the state championship at 18. He then won the US championship at 19, and at age 22, he decided to stop competing because he was scared of getting permanent brain damage. Smart dude. But his love of martial arts never went away. So around 1997, Dana White reached out to him and asked him to commentate for the UFC, and well, he did. And this is when UFC was just getting started. He actually did his first 12 events for free, and the sport quickly blew up. And about 24 years later, he's still commentating for the UFC and getting paid extremely handsomely. Me and my team estimate that he's getting paid around $50,000 per event, and with around 40 UFC events every year, that's around $2 million a year. Pretty good gig if you ask me, but that's not his highest paid gig by any means. This is more of a side hustle for Joe. Yeah, I'm not joking. His revenue source number two is comedy shows and tours. Joe makes a lot more money from comedy. His comedy journey started at 21 years old when one of Joe's friends who thought he was funny convinced him to go to an open mic night. So 3 years later, he's at an open mic night and he meets his now manager who convinced him to move to New York City. And by 26, Joe was able to pay his bills with comedy. And throughout his career as a sitcom actor and host of Fear Factor, Joe kept doing stand-up on the side. And Joe Rogan is still doing stand-up on the side to this day. And I love to see him live, best comedy events I've ever been to, and he's definitely one of the biggest American comedians out there. Now, not only does he love comedy, but he makes some serious money from his comedy shows. He is doing about 4 venues a month in theaters all across the country with an average capacity of 15,000 seats. Tickets for his shows cost anywhere between $40 to $120, but we're gonna average it out to about $60 a ticket, and he generally sells at around 80% capacity or more depending on the venue. Like the one I went to was completely sold out. His takeaway from all sales is around 50%. So 4 venues at 15,000 seats at $60 a ticket times 80% capacity times 50% cut times 12 months in a year is about $17.3 million per year. So every year, if he's touring, he's almost making $20 million. But you can't forget, he also released 6 comedy specials somewhere on Netflix, and we estimate that he got paid around $5 million for his Netflix special. If Joe does 1 comedy special per year, plus tours about 4 times a month, then he'll make over $23 million a year from just doing his comedy. And that, to me, is no joke. See what I did there? Sorry. Revenue source number 3 is Onnit. You might have known, maybe not. Fact of the matter is, Joe Rogan owns 50% of Onnit. He's a 50-50 partner of the health and wellness company, and they offer supplements, food, and really unique fitness equipment as well. They got their popularity for their original kettlebell designs, and they're a really, really popular health and wellness brand. And because Joe is kind of like the face of the brand, he brings a ton of value to the company by marketing it to his audience, while Aubrey does more of the day-to-day operations. And in 2017, Onnit was making around $28 million a year. Today, it's probably closer to anywhere between $50 to $100 million a year, and Joe owns 50% of the company. So in terms of Joe Rogan's net worth from Onnit, it's huge, and I don't think it's gonna get any smaller. Anything, as he grows, so will this brand. But in terms of the distribution per year, it's likely that he takes in about $2 to $4 million. But again, it's a private company, so it's hard to tell, but that would be my educated guess. Now, revenue source number 4 is the Joe Rogan Experience, which we all know and love if you keep up with podcasting as a whole, or just want to stay up to date on the latest news or things that are going on in the world. Joe Rogan Experience is a must listen, and Joe did sell the rights of his Joe Rogan Experience podcast to Spotify, and I know you've heard about it, and that was the original 100-ish million multi-year exclusive deal. But since then, he's signed another deal that was a little bit more private, but I would estimate that it's above this price point. And the number on the original deal and this deal aren't super public. But what does signing an agreement and a deal like this mean? Well, it means that literally every single one of his podcast episodes is exclusive to Spotify, at least up until this new deal. Now it looks like they might be going on other platforms, but Joe actually originally removed his entire back catalog from Apple Podcasts. But again, it does seem like he kept some of the episodes on YouTube, probably because they're still accumulating a lot of views, and YouTube is a great way to promote his new episodes that are on Spotify. So what are my thoughts exactly on this deal? Well, I'll take $100 million for 3 or 4 or 10, or actually I'll take $100 million for any amount of years. That sounds great. But you have to consider this. Howard Stern, I don't know if you remember him, I don't, but he was popular, and he's getting around $90 million a year from his show on SiriusXM. And it looks like Joe's getting somewhere between $20 and $40 million a year. So it's kind of strange that Joe is getting so much less. But again, people only speculated on the number. It could be a much bigger deal than we think it is. And the real question you have to think about as a content creator or as a business owner is, what are you optimizing for? And again, I can't speak to Joe's move, but I think aligning with Spotify and trying that out for a few years seems like a worthwhile experiment. It seems like he got the data, and he's like, all right, now it's time to do something different. Still, maybe Spotify is the play, but at the same time, maybe I want, more distribution across more platforms. So overall, we're estimating that he's making $30 million a year from just that deal. That's pretty good. Can't complain. Again, he also has podcast sponsors, and he does make money from the sponsors on the episodes, and he's getting over 200 million downloads every single month. He's literally the #1 podcast in the world in over 100 countries. Pretty impressive if you ask me. And he was making serious cash for a long time, way before Spotify even came around. So how much is he actually making? Well, I think that Joe's getting paid around, $20 CPM wise. So for every 1,000 downloads, he makes around $20. And if we did some fancy math, 200 million downloads per year divided by 1,000 CPM times 20 times 12 months, it's around $48 million a year from podcast sponsors. Plus, he also makes money from the ads that play on his YouTube videos. And just looking at his numbers from about a year ago, he was raking in about 55 million views a month on his main channel, and his Clips channel gets over 100 million views a month. So combined, he's still getting 150 million views a month on both YouTube channels. And if you were to take a look at RPM, revenue per 1,000 impressions, and for every 1,000 views you get, it's how much you actually get paid from YouTube. And for example, my RPM is around $15, $20 because, I have an audience of 24 and up, which is probably similar to Joe Rogan, but it's also way more business, entrepreneurial, investing focused. Joe Rogan might have that audience, but he also could have a more generalized audience. So if he does have a more generalized audience, he's probably making somewhere around $4, maybe $6 or $8 per 1,000 views. Again, I'm including the shorts as part of this, but over time, I think his view counts on the longs will also go up as the distribution goes back to YouTube. So let's just say 130-ish million views per month divided by 1,000 RPM at, let's say, I don't know, $4. That's around $520,000 per month from YouTube AdSense, which is about $6.24 million per year, just by taking his podcast that he's already doing and re-uploading those clips and videos to YouTube. So what's really interesting about this is that he's actually triple dipping. Spotify's paying him, podcast sponsors are paying him, YouTube AdSense is paying him. So even though Joe isn't posting his full episodes to YouTube anymore, he's still making great money from posting clips. And again, it looks like he might be bringing that back very soon. If at the time you're watching this, he already hasn't brought it back. Now let's do some quick maths and figure out Joe's total estimated revenue. If we add up the UFC commentating, the comedy shows and tours, the Spotify deal, the podcast sponsors, YouTube AdSense, I'm going to estimate, and Joe, if you're watching this, correct me if I'm wrong, the total yearly revenue of around $110 million a year at the time I'm making this. And this is not profit, this is revenue, and it doesn't take into account his costs. But here are the key takeaways that I think will give you some awesome value. If you're a content creator or you aspire to be a content creator or just a business owner, here are the key things you can learn from Joe Rogan. 1, try weird things. Joe Rogan tried stand-up comedy after a friend challenged him to do it and turned out that he loved it. He also commentated 12 UFC fights for free, and he's still doing it over 20 years later. And he even started the Joe Rogan experience just by going live with his friends and goofing around. Remember, it should be fun. That's what life is, and that's, what success looks like. It should be fun, and then you find ways to monetize around the fun. Next, we have the law of 100. When you find something you want to be good at, stick with it for the long run. Commit to it for at least 100 days or 100 episodes or 100 posts. And in my case, I think it's probably closer to 1,000 days or 1,000 episodes or 1,000 posts. Whatever it is, he's been doing stand-up comedy for over 33 years. He's been doing UFC fights for over 25 years, and he's been hosting the Joe Rogan Experience for over 12 years. And his superpower is sticking with it. And third, lean into your strengths and hire for your weaknesses. I see this a lot of times with YouTubers or business owners. They're still doing their editing or things that they just don't have a passion for when they should really be focusing on the thing that they love. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from Joe Rogan's career so far? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe for more business and money content like this. And of course, YouTube thinks you'll enjoy one of these pieces of content here, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks again for watching. Peace.